Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's Rseat is one of the most sought after combos that we've ever had in Gran Turismo 7, and I have the perfect car to fight the meta. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the GT by Citroën. It's unfortunately not very fast in time trial conditions, but when it comes to the race, the tire wear as well as just the overall race pace is fantastic and can definitely help you beat the M6. I only managed to get a 207.1, which didn't even put me in the top 100, though I did have an optimal of a 206.8. It's in situations like this where if you do want to have a good qualifying time, I would suggest just using the meta car. A lot of the same references do work, but when it comes to the race, if you really want to use an anti-meta car, this is definitely the car for you. It definitely punches above its weight when it comes to the race itself, and the tire wear is not the only reason. Starting off in the front straight, I want you to look to the left where all the number boards are. You're going to move onto the curb right before the 100, and right after the 100 meter board is when you're going to hit the brakes. Turn into trail brake right before the 50 meter board. If you need to, dropping down to third gear isn't going to be the end of the world, but you do have to make sure that you get directly back on the throttle. You can actually put your right tires all the way in the green there as long as your left tires stay to the left of the white line. And if you do go in the grass on exit, it's actually not that bad. So just make sure you keep a lot of speed going through that corner. Don't be fooled into thinking you have to go to the left side of the track right there. You really just need to hug the right, and right at the 100 meter board is when you're going to hit the brakes, moving on to the curb right here. Turning in before the 50 meter board, I like to stay in third gear, but again, you can dip down to second gear as long as you get back up to third and back on that throttle gently as soon as you possibly can. You can see that I definitely went in the grass right here. That's one place where I lost a little bit of momentum. I actually lost over a tenth in the beginning sector right here. One thing that's kind of cool about all of the Gran Turismo original tracks is they put little clues all over the track as to where you should be, and this one is no different. If you look for this orange marker on the wall right at the beginning of the curb, that is when you need to start actually turning in, and after you do start turning in, that is when I want you to start lifting off the throttle gently. You don't need to lift off all the way, just enough to get up onto this curb and so you can set up for this left-hander. Speaking of the left-hander, if you look for the marshals there on the right about there is when I want you to switch directions, add a little bit of brake and downshift. Your goal is to stay as close to this inside curb as you possibly can as you exit. Keeping your eye on this dark patch, I like to make sure that my left tires are on the left side of it and I brake right at the end of the curb here on the left. It's really important to hit a late apex on this next right-hander, and you can do that by making sure that your left tires are touching the top left corner of this dark patch here. It's extremely important to make sure that you hit a late apex here because you've got to straighten out your wheel before you get on the throttle. There's a massive bump right here. If you add too much throttle or if you're steering too much, you're going to bottom out the suspension and that's going to make your car jump. You do not want to jump here. You want to make sure that your car is smoothly going over that bump before you add full throttle, and if you have to track out all the way here, make sure you turn back onto the bridge before you hit that wall. I believe the optimal shift point for this car is about 85 to 95%, but I'm not 100% sure. What I do know is you don't want to rev it up past the rev line. Looking for the 150 meter board ahead, once you see that, look for these triangles on the ground, and right when you get to the triangles, that is when I want you to hit the brakes. Turn in at the 50 meter board, get down to second gear, and make sure that you hit this apex and get fully on the throttle in third gear to make sure that you get the best run going into the next corner. As you can see, there's a bump there as well, so you've got to be very smooth as you apply the throttle, but you do have to get on it quickly. Staying on the left side of the track, I want you to look for this red mark on the barrier to the right. At that point is when you're going to start turning in, downshift to fourth gear, and after that, you're going to add just the smallest amount of brake. I'm talking literally only about 10% brake. You're going to get to a point where you're going to add more steering, and just the act of steering will slow the car down even more. When you get all the way up to the apex, you should see this red mark on the barrier in the distance, and right when your nose is pointing there, you should be able to add full throttle if you are in the correct position. You definitely want to get on the throttle as early as you can and fully in one motion to maximize the amount of speed that you can get down this really long straight. Like I mentioned before, I definitely have a 0.8 optimal, and 2 of the tenths are before this point, so just something to keep in mind if you're really pushing for a really good time with this car. As you approach the number boards, you're going to pass the 200, and right after you pass the 150 meter board, you're going to hit the brakes really heavily and move all the way up onto the curb. Get down to third gear, and about 10 meters before the 50 meter board, you're going to start turning in. You do want to hit this curb, but if you hit too much of it, there's actually a big bump, so it can get in the way of you getting on the throttle. You want to get on that throttle heavily, of course. Make sure you track out, but you don't go all the way past and into that grass because it will ruin your lap. I'm going to keep it in slow motion because I do want you to make sure that you can follow this line. You're going to try to touch the outside curb there, turn in, miss this first apex so you can hit this second one. You're going to miss the grass, of course, trying to get as close as you can without touching it. And then you're going to look for this dark patch. Again, the dark patch is a clue. You're going to drive straight through the middle, changing directions and looking for this next curb here on the right. I want you to keep steering past this curb, but try to avoid touching the grass. It can make you slide. Right before this crest right here, you're going to lift off, as you can see, hug this one tightly, and you're not going to get back on the throttle until the car settles at the bottom of that dip. As you can see, I hit the grass and that almost caused me to slide all the way out into the wall, but luckily I was able to catch it and not hit the wall. As you approach the next number boards, I do want you to use the curb, but you've got to make sure you don't go past the curb because it will make you slide out. Right at the 100-meter board, you're going to hit the brakes heavily, turn in at the 50, get down to 4th gear, come off the brakes, add more steering, get all the way up in this curb, back on the throttle, and make sure you keep steering to the right to avoid hitting this wall right here. There's a good chance if you mainly do sport mode that you have never actually driven this track, so give yourself a lot of patience. There's a huge, steep learning curve, but it is incredibly rewarding and it is one of my favorite tracks of all time. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, I actually lost over a 10th just in the very first sector by itself. I didn't use enough of the inside, that green part, and I didn't maintain enough speed through there. I probably lost half of that 10th just right here. Like I said, don't be tempted to go to the left there before turning to the right, just hug the right, and I lost the other half of the 10th right here. I turned in a little bit too late, and then I got on the throttle too heavily, which caused me to go in the grass, and all in all, I definitely lost about a 10th. I've actually gone faster than a full 10th right there. I've gone a 0.9 there. Finding the perfect balance of sacrificing speed throughout the S's and making sure that you set yourself up to get the very best exit onto the bridge without slowing down too much is probably one of the biggest challenges in any track in Gran Turismo 7. It's extremely difficult to get the balance right, but you do want to focus on trying to get a really good exit up the hill and through the bridge. This corner is actually pretty similar too. It's really tight, it's uphill, and there is a bump right when you're supposed to get on the throttle, so you just got to make sure that you're smooth and you don't use too much steering as you're getting on the throttle because you can actually cause understeer by steering too much. I apexed just slightly too early there. You can definitely go a little bit faster, and that left-hander plus I believe the bridge and then this right-hander that we just did all added up to another 10th or so that I lost in this lap. On this right-hander, you're probably going to be tempted to dip down to 2nd gear, and it is a pretty sharp-looking corner, but you don't need to actually trace the line that you're trying to go through. It doesn't have to match the shape of the corner, I mean. It should be a really rounded line. You should be able to carry a lot of speed and get on the throttle really early. When it comes to this section, I definitely didn't get enough momentum coming out of that last sharp corner, and because I touched the grass right here, I lost a little bit more momentum, and then the final bit that I lost, I braked a little too late here, didn't really hit the apex as hard as I could have, and that made it so I didn't get on the throttle as early as I could have, and I had to steer too much. All in all, I think I could have gotten a 0.8. Well, I know I could have gotten a 0.8, but I think I could probably get a 0.7, and some of the really fast guys could probably get 0.5s with this car. Some of you may be curious why I chose this as the anti-meta car if it is so incredibly off pace when it comes to the time trial, and there are a few reasons why. Firstly, for whatever reason, I think, and I don't know for sure, I think that this car is just powerful enough that with the added fuel weight, it doesn't seem to slow the car down as much as the other cars in the class. Partially because of the gearing and partially just because of the power in general. When it's in slipstream, it is incredibly fast, and so you can definitely pull off passes on pretty much any other car in the class when it comes to the long straights. It's also very nimble, it likes to change directions really quickly, and it is surprisingly stable, which is really important, especially for the downhill S's right before the bridge. The main factor for why this car is actually extremely good in the race is because of the tire wear. It is so incredibly good on the tires that you can do pit strategies that other cars will definitely not be able to match. They could probably survive the same pit strategies, but this car can thrive in these situations. I think that you wouldn't have an issue pitting even on lap 2 or on lap 7. I think you'd absolutely be able to get away with that with this car. Maybe even not taking tires, but I haven't experimented with it, so take that with a grain of salt. It's possible you can't, but I would not be surprised to hear that this car could actually do a no tire race. Since this is a French car on a French track and we have our French friend directly in front of us showing us exactly how to drive it, I thought it was all very appropriate, and I do think that it was the right choice to choose this car for the anti-meta car, despite the fact that it really is not fast in the time trial. Now, I know this is actually going to be a controversial thing to say. I did mention it during the leaderboard portion of the video, but feel free to just use the meta car to qualify with. You are still winning with an anti-meta car, even if you have to use the meta car to get yourself set up a little bit better. But as you can see, we're set up. We're starting close to the back of the pack, and I want you to keep that in mind as you watch this video. Track position is king. You never want to give up track position, and the better your track position, the better chances you have of winning, or at least finishing really well. So of course, you definitely want to qualify as well as you can, but with everyone this close, with custom slipstream, and with straights this long, you don't really have to worry too much if you don't have the best qualifying time. So let's take a second to discuss the actual strategy. Most people are going to be pitting lap 4 or 5. The optimal time to pit is most likely going to be lap 4. As we mentioned last week, and as I talk about pretty frequently, when it comes to having to split a race almost in half when it's not an even number of laps, the best thing to do is make your longer stint the second one, because you're going to have less fuel weight damaging the tires, and you should be able to maintain a better pace because you're doing that. That, however, is in an absolutely perfect world, and as you know, racing is never perfect. What's more important is that you go in the pits either with people you trust or just away from people that you do not trust. So it's important to make sure that you're not really rigid on your pit strategy, and you have options and you have the wherewithal to know that you can make it if you don't go into the pits exactly when you want to. Most cars are going to suffer if you pit as early as lap 5 or if you pit as late as lap 6, but this car is not one of them. I think you're going to see that this car has fantastic tire wear, and not only does it make it so you don't run out of tires and get into a dangerous situation towards the end of the stint, you'll find that you can more easily maintain a really good pace throughout the entirety of the race, whereas a lot of people who are using other cars, even the meta car, are probably going to suffer towards the end of their stints pretty badly. Because of how tricky the S's are, and because of how differently a lot of the cars perform, you're going to find a lot of people are going to get bunched up on this bridge, and I'm going to say that you probably shouldn't go 4 wide, but if you do decide to go 4 wide, you can probably make it stick with this car because it is incredible. Now, I'm not sure exactly why Sloth did it, but Sloth started turning right when he went in the brakes and drove directly into Jaws, and luckily because of the timing, and luckily because he did that, I was able to get all the way away from them. Lulu, our friend Mr. Elsie, was able to get all the way on the outside, and I was able to maintain the slipstream with Sloth still right behind, but I had track position, I was able to pull off that ridiculous move, and it's all thanks to this fantastic French car. Jumping all the way to lap 3, Mr. Elsie was able to get all the way in front of this Beetle, and I just wanted to take a second to mention the Beetle. If you are looking for another option, if you like to jump around and try out different cars, the Beetle is also a fantastic anti-meta, and I actually almost chose it as the anti-meta, but I was battling Citroens and I didn't have a lot of luck against them. Now, when it comes to racing this guy, I've never raced him before. I was trying to be really aggressive, but he was able to defend extremely well, and I actually didn't get past him until he just completely gave up the position. I think he realized that we were losing a lot of time by battling, but a shout out to this guy. He was actually really clean, really quick, and he definitely showed what the Beetle can do. Jumping to lap 4, we've got the meta car directly in front of us, and I just want to use this as an illustration of how incredibly important it is to get this right-hander correctly. What I think happened is he apexed too early, got on the throttle too heavily, and kind of bounced just a little bit, and that completely killed his momentum. Despite the fact that he had slipstream from a Supra in front of him, I was able to get all the way past him going into this corner, and I was able to completely take the position. Shout out to that guy. He's a good driver. He was clean. It's just a mistake. I don't want to make him feel bad or anything, but it's actually really easy to make that same mistake. I made that mistake a few times. I spun out. I hit the wall. Pretty much everyone's been there. It's just really important to make sure that you're patient on the throttle and you hit a late apex so you can straighten out the wheel. When you are turning too much on that bridge or leading up to the bridge, what happens is you actually bottom out your suspension, and that is what causes your car to bounce. If you can loosen up your steering, straighten out the wheel a little bit, and use less than full throttle or less than full brake, over any of the bumps, then you won't be at risk of bottoming out, and you should be safe, even on the really scary bumpy parts. As we approach the end of this lap, I want to talk about one more thing that I actually completely forgot about when it comes to why I like this car for the anti-meta car. It's actually something that is completely unfair, and I kind of wish that they would fix it, but only kinda. When it comes to entering the pits, you can take the last corner just like you usually do. You can hit the same brake and turn-in markers, but you got to make sure that you continue steering, avoid that white line. I almost hit it, but okay. This actually doesn't have anything to do with the acceleration of the car. I mean, it has a little bit to do with the acceleration of the car, but as you can see, that Supra was more than a car length ahead of me when we went to the pits. All of the pits are supposed to be standardized. Everyone has pretty much the exact same pit stop if they do the same thing, but because of the gearing of the cars, sometimes cars come out a little bit sooner, and I was able to come out sooner on top of the fact that I had better acceleration, and because of the ghosting, I drove straight through that Supra. I actually think this is a really silly thing. I don't think they meant to do it deliberately. I don't know if there's enough of a need for them to change it, but I do know that many big races have been decided by that kind of thing. I've actually lost races by people doing the exact same thing, and it is a ridiculous advantage if you have this car versus other cars. I'm not sure how this works against the meta car, against the M6 when it comes to the pit advantage, but there is a distinct actual advantage to going in the pits in this car versus other cars, as you can see, of course, against the Supra. Now, like I mentioned before, a lot of people are going to be pitting on lap 5. I like to pit on lap 4, and you can see that I am 17 seconds behind the leader after coming out of the pits. For those of you who are actual seasoned race fans, you know that an undercut is very powerful, and you probably know what an undercut is. If you do not know what an undercut is, it's when you go into the pits before your opponents, and you use the advantage of having fresher tires to go faster on your outlap than they could go on the lap where they didn't go in the pits, and you did. Because of that, because of how powerful it is, I was able to catch all the way up to these guys who were in reality about a second ahead of me. Maybe a little bit less. If you needed more evidence that this car is really good as an anti-meta car, the top 3 cars in the lobby right now are Citroens, while the meta car is behind us. Now, that of course has a lot to do with the drivers, and KP, who's in the meta car behind, definitely pulled over at the beginning. If KP didn't pull over, I think he would just be light years ahead of everyone. KP's a fantastic driver, but it is pretty cool seeing that the anti-meta car of choice is the top 3 cars in the lobby at this moment. Now, because we're all in the same car, that means that it's all down to the driving itself and a little bit to the strategy. Both of these guys had tires that were 1 lap newer, and since it's the Citroen, it's not going to make too much of a difference, but it does make a tangible difference. Even if it's not a lot, it does exist. Now, on one hand, there's a chance that I could try to push this guy who could then push the other guy, or I could push him and he could battle the next guy, and we could try to get away from KP, but there's really no getting away from KP, so I decided I was just going to try to be really aggressive and pass one of the guys, and I was able to do exactly that. It was actually so effective that I almost got all the way next to Lookie, but I wasn't quite able to do that, so I decided to slot in behind him and try to set up for a different move. Now, I made a big mistake when it came to trying to follow him through there, and it led to Pit Cobra Tapia hitting me, and that almost ended my race right there. Luckily it didn't, and luckily he wasn't able to get in front of me. I was still able to stay with Lookie, but funny enough, it did allow KP to get all the way in front of Cobra Tapia, and so then it was myself, Lookie, and then the meta car, driven by our friend KP. Lookie had done a really good job of keeping me behind him, but it wasn't quite enough because with the custom slipstream, I just have to be within a couple tenths, and with this really long straight, as long as I'm right behind him, I'm going to be able to get all the way next to him. Now, there are a lot of things he could do. He could pull to the right to try to defend, and I'm not sure exactly why he wasn't trying to defend, but he didn't. I was able to get all the way next to him, and that meant that the move was on. Leading to this next braking zone, it's really important to try to maintain the inside, because if you're on the outside, the person on the inside could just choose to track you out, and then your race is pretty much over. Luckily, of course, I was never going to do that to him, and I was all the way in front of him, so it was pretty easy just to pull off that move without any kind of drama, and in fact, KP almost followed me through, but not quite. Despite my tires that were a lap older, I was able to stay all the way in front of him, and in fact I was a little bit further ahead than he was in front of me, but it still wasn't enough to be able to defend against him without actually going out of my way to defend. Like I mentioned before, I never really want to be on the outside going into this next corner, so I went ahead, moved to the inside to defend, and of course he continued to try to pull off a move on me. Rather than go for an outside pass on me, he decided to take the smart route and go for a little bit of a switcheroo, and he was able to get all the way next to me going into the next set of corners. In the previous races I'd done with him, he was making sure that he pushed me all the way until my tires were on the grass, so I gave him the same treatment. He tried to give me the same treatment again, but unfortunately he was on the outside, and that just made him bounce off me. That led to KP getting all the way in front of him, and I believe he had to serve a penalty, so it ended up being the end of the race for him. But that meant that I had to get away from KP, who is in the meta car, and KP is just insanely fast. There's a good chance KP would have just pushed me to make sure that no one else would try to pass either of us, but I didn't want to take that chance, so I immediately defended and tried to make sure that I didn't just give away my position right here. Truth be told, the vast majority of the time, KP actually likes to just push me a lot and sometimes just refuses to actually beat me. He'll pass me when the opportunity arises, or if I'm going really slow, or if I've done something messed up, but for whatever reason, KP is just a big old sweetheart and he just lets me win all the time. I was afraid this was not going to be one of those times, so I was trying to drive as fast as I possibly could, but to be quite honest, I thought that my fate was sealed, and I was pretty sure by the time we got to the straight, he was just going to pass me, and that was going to be the end. I, of course, wasn't just going to give up. I would try to pass him again. I would try to defend, but I was pretty certain at this point, especially with him right on my tail at the bridge, that he was going to be able to pass me without any kind of issue as soon as we got to that long straight. At this point, by the fact that he wasn't getting close and bumping me, I just assumed he was biding his time and trying to position himself correctly so that he was going to be exactly where he wanted to be going into the straight. But as soon as I took that left-hander, I saw a glimmer of hope. Now, I have to be honest with you, I am not convinced that KP didn't just throw this. He definitely knows it's Monday. He knows it's my time to make the guide, and he knows how cool it would be if I was able to win with the anti-meta car, especially with him in the meta car. So I kind of think he probably lifted. I don't want to go and look, but if he did lift, KP, you're a big old sweetheart. Thank you for not passing me here. If I did beat him just out of actually earning the victory, then I feel very good about myself, because KP is just, I cannot stress how good KP is, and this may come as a surprise. He's a controller driver. He is still on controller, and he is definitely one of the fastest guys in the entire region. Fantastic guy, fantastic driver. I'm glad I got to meet him a couple weekends ago, and yeah, I didn't want to spoil it. There's still one corner, but with where we are, it seemed pretty obvious that I was going to have the win. I do think KP probably just gave it to me. If not, fantastic. If so, KP, you're a big old sweetheart, and yeah, that is why the Citroen is a fantastic anti-meta car. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll be making another one of these guides next week. To finish off, I'm going to leave you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you. Thank you very much.